Hello everyone and welcome back to the next episode of the Road to the Master series. This is the episode number 68, in which I will cover the analysis of the round number 4 from the Polish First League. If you remember from the last video yesterday, I have just won quite a lucky game. Not only that, our team also won, so we were in the high hopes and the good mood for more. I got paired against a lower rated opponent, but I'm not sure still to this day why I had a lot of respect for him, because he was a junior player. I mean, we are playing the senior league, but there are plenty of younger guys than myself. And he rose quite a lot in the recent times, let's say, with the rating. Therefore, there were not so many games opening wise that I could, prepare with. And his rating gain was making me unsure whether or not it's a good thing or not about him, because is it deserved, is it not deserved. On top of that, I knew that just a few months back, before our game, he won against one of the Polish grandmasters I also respect a lot, so it was kind of confusing. And looking through the positions, the openings that I can choose, mostly his choices against mine would be uncomfortable for me. Therefore, I decided to try out something I did not try for quite a long time, which is like few years actually. And after his e4, I went for Sicilian, which is actually not that surprising, but later on I decided that against open Sicilian, I will go for the accelerated dragon. There were a few reasons behind it, and one of them was that I was unsure whether or not he's going to play Maroczy bind variation. So it was like 50-50 between having to suffer in the Maroczy bind or maybe having a playable position in more, let's say, natural style of knight c3. However, in the game, he indeed went for the Maroczy bind, so I knew that my hopes for winning the game are getting slimmer. At the same time, though, my draw with the black pieces would be kind of alright for the team, so I thought before the game, alright, if it's Maroczy, then let it be like that, and we'll see how it goes. I opted for the Gurganidze system, which is basically the attempt to delay the bishop's development so that in the near future I can take on d4 and pull the queen onto the center of the board. And basically what we've got at this very point is the starting position, let's say, of the variation I chose, in which white has a few options. He can castle, he can play f3, maybe some other moves are okay too. Nevertheless, we are still in theory, so I will not get into too much detail. My opponent in the end decided to go for the f3 move, solidifying e4 pawn, trying to prepare b3 perhaps. I chose a4, yet again, usual stuff, castles, queen a5, rook a to b1. At this point already I was not that sure of what to do exactly in terms of the specific moves, what are the most common ones and so on, but in terms of the ideas I still knew what to do, and it's important, especially in such scenarios as in the Maroczy bind system. It's not really about the variations, it's about the understanding of what's going on, and the general idea usually in those cases, thanks to the pawn being advanced, thanks to the queen being on the queen side too, is to continue with bishop e6 with the attempts in the near future to perhaps attack the pawn. So if my opponent would like to continue development like rook f to c1, which is natural, I would put the pressure immediately, and then my opponent doesn't matter whether he plays b3 or b4 actually. I would be taking the pawn either normally or en passant, and then having this kind of a nice square for the queen is the, let's say, pinpoint of the variation. However, this is not what happened in the game, because my opponent went straight away from the usual exchanges in those scenarios, which is knight d5, also a playable normal move in these circumstances. But I guess it was out of my notes, or at least that's what I remember as of now, because I did not play it ideally against it. The general idea is obviously that with this pawn push and the queen a5 move, I would like to exchange the queens and then furthermore some light pieces on the board, because I am lacking space, let's say. However, already at this point, my opponent could have taken on e7, and this is actually one of the main moves, and quite a crucial one, right? Because I'm losing the pawn, so I need to know what to do. And after king h8, bishop takes d2, the point is that this knight is kind of lost in here, so I can simply play rook f to e8, hitting the knight, and after the knight goes back, it seems like white is fine, but he's really not, because after takes, I can take the bishop, make the use of the spin, exploit it, And with that, with my amazing bishops looking towards the queen side, with the pawn being so advanced and protected, I'm actually having kind of the initiative here, and white needs to be really careful to not be in a bad shape. For all of those reasons, 97 was not a big threat to myself, and I knew that this idea will not work thanks to this pin along the e-file. But as I've said, my opponent took on d2, and already in here I had a chance to a little bit get the initiative going for myself, but I, as I've said before, couldn't do it. I miscalculated the variation after knight d5, cd5. I only thought about bishop d7, which would not be the most, let's say, dynamic approach. I should have taken with the knight, and after cd, give the in-between check, also making my bishop better, and only then afterwards go back to d7 with the ideas that thanks to this bishop being superior to this one, perhaps this one also is a little bit better than that one, I would be willing to start my initiative going on the queen side with some b5 move. Also e6 is kind of an interesting opportunity, because I would be willing to suggest a trade so that if the opponent takes, I take, my bishop is very good. If he does not take, I am the one to take, and then I'm opening up another diagonal for my bishop too. So those would be the interesting ideas, and overall the idea is to try to go for the queenside, let's say, activity. In the game, however, I chose to take on d5 with the bishop, and then go away with the knight to d7 with the hopes of getting it to the c5 square. The problem with this variation specifically is though that I knew that I kind of wanted the endgame with the knight versus this bishop specifically, but it will be just simply too hard for me to exchange those on my terms, let's say. And also without the white squared bishop, it's perhaps not like impossible for me, but simply harder to go for this b5 move and generally the initiative there. So those were the problems, and at this point it's already, let's say, known that white should not have any problems. He has the bishop pair, even though one of the bishop is not the best one in the world. I mean, bishop pair is the bishop pair, space advantage is the space advantage, so like, yeah, I cannot be better. On top of that, after bishop e3, I no longer have this bishop d4 centralizing idea, so yeah, white is kind of fine. And I have some difficulties with playing b5, because I would have to play either rook a5 or rook b8. Even if I would get to b5, I can spend so much time on it that my opponent will simply try something like this. So all in all, I decided that, okay, I need to change my plans a little, or at least adjust them. So I played rook f2 c8 first, in order to, after bishop b5, hitting the knight, to be able to play knight c5, because if my rook was not there, I would be forced, let's say, to take with the pawn. And imagine that it happens also like this. I was not sure if that's something I desire, because if, for example, also the b6 move would be included, this bishop on c6 would be just too good in my eyes, hitting the rook, hitting the pawn, making my space on the queen side worse, and so on. So yes, it would, you know, still require some bad moves from me to achieve that position anyway. This was my concern, so that's why I've played rook to c8 first, and only then knight c5. Rook f2 c1 happened with the pressure towards the knight, and I thought that I can do two things at the same time, meaning protecting the knight and attacking the bishop, and I now played rook a5. But my opponent obviously just went away, and at this point already, I believe this is like problem for both sides. I am not that sure what should I do in here, to be honest, because b5 is tactically unsound perhaps, because after b5 bishop attacks the pawn, I am protecting it with the rook, but the rook can be simply attacked, had to go away, pawn would be, let's say, missing. And if not that, like, what else am I going to do? At the same time, what is my opponent willing and going to do, right? So it's not that clear for both sides how to continue. And I know I would repeat myself, but I will still say that usually, even strategically, I'm not that sure what to do. I try to rely on some tactical stuff, because in the end, I indeed went for b5, allowing bishop d2, hitting my rook and the pawn, because after rook a7, bishop takes b5, I have rook b8, creating the pressure towards the b file and actually getting my pawn back. So tactically it was actually sound, it was okay to push b5, and I chose to do that. After bishop c6 though, I have a choice with which piece should I take the pawn, and apparently I have made a wrong decision, to be honest, because if you think about it, this rook is not the greatest of all, this one is much better. So exchanging that rook is not that great for me, and I indeed went for this and that, and then yeah, opponent simply has a little bit better pieces. So what I should have done instead was simply to take with the bishop on b2, then try to solidify it with the a3 move and stay like that. So those are all the little nuances, but we will see that in the game without the rooks and the rook being placed to c4, kind of attacking my pawn. When I push the a3 pawn, first and foremost, my opponent could have chosen some rook b4 move, you know, taking over the open file. That would not be the case if I had the rook still operating there. That's the first thing. Other thing is that, for example, bishop e3 might be played. Indeed it was, putting the pressure towards my knight and the rook, pinning it, and all of a sudden I'm once again under somewhat uncomfortable pressure. So yeah, still I'm okay. I'm not losing by any means, but during the whole game I kind of didn't ever feel okay. I was still under constant pressure, and you know, it's not that either easy or happy to play a position like this. But you know, it was my choice, so I have to live with that. Obviously, with this pressure, I had to play rook a5, trying to protect the knight. He attacked my rook. I went away. He pinned me once more, and you would expect that this will end up in the 3-4 partition. So, but yeah, it didn't happen because I've played rook a5. As I've said, my position was not good, so I would be happy to take a draw, but my opponent can and will simply continue playing. So he played some king f1 move, king e2 move, and I'm kind of stuck. All of my pieces are unable to move for the most part, and I've made a choice in here that I'm not happy with, even though computer approves it, and by, you know, looking at the rest of the game it was kind of fine, but yeah, I don't like it. Why? I went for f5, which is the move that disrupts my pawn chain overall and also around the king, so it's never that alright. And on top of that, it is attempting to open up the position, and my opponent has the bishop pair, not myself, so kind of the risky choice strategically. Yet again, I wanted to, you know, back it up with some tactical calculations and all that stuff, saying that all right, maybe it's looking dubious, but I am fine. But you never know what happens in the next 15 moves, and my opponent could have easily played for so long and you know, test me out. So f5 move, even though it's lagged by the computer and so on, human-wise was perhaps not the way to go. Yes, my attempt was obviously to try to take on e4 and create a weakness of in my opponent's camp, at least to have something going on, but my opponent simply didn't allow it. He just took an f5, and after gf5 he played g4, very good move, and after fg, rook g4 was actually kind of an interesting try for the more of a piece activity, but he chose obviously natural f to g4, and the point is that, yeah, my king is not that great anymore. He has 2 versus 1 pawn advantage there, so he might be willing to go for the you know, some passer, and outside passer being on the h file, let's say, with the bishop pair and open king. Yeah, it's not a good mixture, so for those reasons I really shouldn't have played 5. I should have been more patient, but you know, now that the position is as it is, I need to still continue playing, right? So I played bishop e5, I don't know, hitting the pawn. He chose to advance it. I played h6. Yet again, I'm not so sure if that's a good idea, but I was actually at this point kind of scared of just pawns being pushed further because my king would be simply too limited. So I've chose h6, even though it's a little bit of a weakening move. And at this point already my opponent have plenty of choices. Since still I am unable to move most of my pieces in the, you know, any good fashion, he can, I don't know, maneuver with the king for some time or whatever. He can try to get to the f rank with the rook. Like, he has all the time in the world. So I'm not quite sure if h5 immediately was that good of a move, because it renders the pawn structure in a very specific way. There will be not ever a g5, g8, g possibility. It's not like he would like to do that. It's just, you know, he's simply making himself not able to play this in the future. But yeah, okay, h5 is not that bad of a move, right? So in here I have a choice what to do, and I will say it for the first time, I have not that much to do. However, thanks to the fact that he set up the structure in the specific way, I knew that with the control over dark squares, especially when the bishop will be gone, I would be kind of alright to hold this position with the opposite colored bishops. So even though the threat of losing the pawn on c5 was all the time on the board, I thought to myself that, okay, maybe now I can actually live with that, and I played rook a7. Rook was passive for the rook was passive for this whole time, and I've decided, okay, now maybe this is the time to finally activate it, because I'm not that worried about being exchanged there, because then with bishop d6 move I am holding everything here. And then, as I've said, this situation, thanks to the fact that my opponent fixed the structure in this way, I should be easily holding even without a pawn on the board. So this was a good attempt by myself, and I thought that, okay, I will be willing to, I don't know, maybe maneuver the rook like this or like that, or with having this rook on c7, with the attack to the bishop, I can actually try to play e6, undermine it, right, and so on. So I felt like, okay, now I'm, having some ideas at least to continue. And my opponent immediately just went for this bishop c5 move, which I quite don't understand. And I thought that I am constantly under pressure throughout the whole game, and maybe my opponent, what he wanted simply was a draw. I don't know, maybe he just also didn't have the idea of how can he push it further. But yeah, first and foremost, he can just try to push g5 anyway and create this h pawn passer and maybe do something about it with the bishop pair. Maybe he can try to do that. Maybe he can try to combine those ideas. Bishop c5, yes, it takes the pawn, but it kind of removes any ideas for the opponent to win the game. As I've said, I've played bishop d6, he just went away, and I've decided, okay, I had this idea in mind or whatever, but since my opponent is kind of showing lack of the ambition to win the game, or maybe not ambition, maybe ability, I don't know exactly, I just went for the different route. I just went rook a5 with rook c5, and he exchanged the rook. So it kind of shows that he was not in the mood, but simply did not see any way further how to progress. And yeah, that's how the game finished. After bishop c5, we basically agreed to a draw, or maybe he played king e4. I don't actually remember, because maybe it's just the live board move that didn't happen in the game. So yeah, and that was the game overall. As you can tell, on the high level, playing accelerated dragon and being faced with the Maroc bind is not that comfortable. I had basically one, maybe at most two slight chances to at least get a little bit better position, but I just didn't play the best moves, and because of that, for the 40 moves, because that's how long the game was, I was under constant pressure. So this draw feels like a kind of a lucky one, but also a desired one, so I will not complain about the result. But opening wise, I guess I will not be getting back to the accelerated dragon for quite some time, but you never know. Maybe I will go against my own words, and I will play it anyway. So yeah, that's the game. I drew. It was all right result. No losses in the first 4 rounds. Always happy about it. So yeah, thank you all for watching this analysis. We'll see each other tomorrow for the analysis of the round number 5. So stay tuned for it. Once more, as in the previous round number 3, I was forced to think for 5 minutes on the move number 2. So this is the teaser for you. You will be able to see how once more I got surprised in the opening phase. We'll see about that. But for this game, that's all. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see each other tomorrow. Bye bye.